At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
My husband passed away many years ago. Since then, I've sent money to my mother-in-law every month, not out of obligation, but because of a last promise I made to my husband in the hospital room. $500 regularly, like breathing, until one day I looked at my bank account and realized something was very wrong. At that moment, I understood a horrifying truth. Not every promise to the deceased comes from sincerity. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Quick note, this story includes some fictionalized elements for educational and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental, but the message is completely real. I've been sending $500 every month to my mother-in-law, Eleanor, for 5 years straight. Not because I had to, not because anyone forced me. I did it because of a promise. A dying promise made in a hospital room on the worst day of my life. Mason, my ex-husband, he was in a car accident. The doctor said there wasn't much time. He was pale machines beeping around him like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for, and all he could think about was his mother. Take care of her, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of monitors. Promise me, Vic, she has no one else. So I promised. I meant every word. I gripped his hand like I could squeeze life back into him through sheer willpower alone. 5 years later, here I am. It's Monday morning, and my dental practice is filling up with patients. The receptionist is checking people in. The hygienists are setting up chairs with fresh instruments, and I'm standing in my office, staring at my calendar like it's written in a language I don't understand anymore. I've been running on fumes for weeks, maybe months. The exhaustion has settled into my bones so deep I can't remember what feeling normal is supposed to be like. My name is Victoria Hartwell. I'm 38 years old. I own a successful dental practice here in Charlotte, North Carolina. On paper, my life looks solid, successful even. But the truth is messier than what people see when they look at me. I pull up my banking app during my lunch break 15 minutes between Mrs. Patterson's root canal and the Henderson twins' cleanings. There it is, the monthly transfer to Eleanor's account. $500. Same day, same amount, same rhythm. 5 years of this. 60 payments, $30,000 just gone. Most people would have stopped by now. Most people would have said, she's his mother, let her figure it out. Or they would have adjusted the amount sent, less found a way to make it work better for themselves. But that wasn't who I was. That wasn't who Mason believed I was when he made me swear on his life that I'd look after her. The thing is, I'm barely looking after myself. My practice is successful. I've got a good reputation, steady clients, a solid income. But money disappears faster than you'd think. The rent on this clinic is steep. The utilities keep climbing. My own apartment isn't cheap, especially in Charlotte. There are student loans from dental school that still haunt me, whispering about choices I made at 22 that I'm still paying for at 38. There are moments when I'm choosing between fixing the autoclave or buying groceries for the week. There are nights when I lie awake doing mental math trying to figure out if I can make it work until the next paycheck arrives. And then there's the $500 that walks out of my account like clockwork every single month. Reliable as sunrise, consistent as pain. I don't resent Eleanor for it, at least I don't think I do. She raised Mason. She's alone now, widowed, grieving her own son, even though he's been gone for 5 years. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't fade on some predictable timeline like a bruise that yellows and then disappears. I understand that better than most people do. I carry my own version of it, the weight of promises to the dead, the guilt of still being alive, the strange obligation to prove that their memory meant something. So I keep my promise, every month, without fail, because that's who I am. That's who I've always been, the woman who doesn't quit, the woman who takes care of people even when it costs her something. But as I'm sitting in my office watching the minutes tick by before my next patient, something catches in my chest. A small voice in the back of my mind, the kind of voice you're trained to ignore because it feels dangerous. Whispers, a question I've never let myself ask out loud. What if I couldn't do this anymore? The thought terrifies me, not because of Eleanor exactly, but because breaking that promise feels like breaking the last real connection I have to Mason. It feels like admitting that everything I've sacrificed, everything I've given up, the vacations, I didn't take the emergency dental chair I couldn't repair, the life I kept putting on hold, it would all be for nothing. I close my banking app and take a breath. I'll deal with the numbers later, I always do. My 2 o'clock patient is arriving and I need to be Dr. Hartwell right now. I need to be composed, professional, trustworthy. I need to be the person who keeps her promises and never wavers no matter how much it costs her. What I don't know, what I can't possibly know as I'm washing my hands and forcing a smile in the mirror, is that today will be the day everything changes. Today is the day someone will ask me a question that will unravel 5 years of careful balance. Today is the day I'll discover that the dead don't always stay dead. Today is the day I'll find out that some promises are built on lies. That evening, I'm sitting alone in my apartment. The city lights blur outside my window, Charlotte stretching out like something alive, pulsing with the kind of normalcy I haven't felt in years. I make myself tea chamomile, the kind that's supposed to calm your nerves, and I pull out my laptop. I don't know why. Habit maybe. Or maybe some part of me needs to see the numbers written down to believe they're real. The spreadsheet is old. I've been maintaining it since Mason died. Every month I've logged the transfer to Eleanor's account. Date amount balance. It's organized, methodical, the way I organize everything else in my life. 50 years of careful precision. 5 years of $500 a month. 60 payments. $30,000. I stare at that number until it stops meaning anything. My mind drifts backward the way it always does on nights like this. Back to a time when Mason was alive. Back to when I still believed he was the person I married. We met at a bar in downtown Charlotte. I was 26. He was 28 and charming in that effortless way that some men have, the kind of charm that makes you feel like you're the only interesting person in the room. He bought me a drink. We talked until closing time. 3 months later, I moved in with him. 3 years after that, we got married. Those early years were good. Really good. We were happy in that uncomplicated way that comes before you understand what marriage actually requires. Mason had a job managing sales for a construction company. It paid well enough. We rented a nice apartment. We went to dinner, took vacations, made plans. I was finishing my dental degree. He was supportive, or at least he seemed to be. Looking back now, I realize I was probably just blind to the cracks forming beneath the surface. The cracks started small. A missed dinner, which he blamed on work. A phone call he took in the other room, hushed voice, quick ending, when he saw me watching. A credit card statement I saw accidentally with charges I didn't recognize. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off. "Just some guy stuff with the guys," he said. "You wouldn't understand." Except I understood perfectly. I understood that he was lying. The first time I found out about the infidelity was 5 years into our marriage. Not through any detective work. He told me himself, which somehow felt worse than if I'd discovered it on my own. He said he was sorry. He said it meant nothing. He said he wanted to make it work. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because we were married. Because divorce felt like failure, and I wasn't a person who failed at things. But he did it again and again. By year 10, I'd stopped counting. By year 12, I'd stopped asking questions. What was the point? He'd deny it anyway. Or he'd get angry and turn it around on me. "You're never home enough," he'd say. "You're always working. What do you expect me to do?" As if his infidelity was my fault. As if my career, which I'd worked my entire life to build, was somehow the reason he couldn't keep his promises. The money problems started around the same time the affairs intensified. Mason had gotten involved with a group of guys who gambled. Cards mostly. Poker night every Thursday that somehow stretched into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. He came home with empty pockets and excuses. Then came the missed mortgage payments, the credit cards maxed out, the collection calls. I paid for most of it. My income, my savings, my reputation. I put his name on nothing after a certain point because I was afraid of what he'd destroy next. By year 12, I was done. I loved him once, or I thought I did. But that version of Mason had been gone for years. The man left behind was someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't particularly like, someone I was afraid to be married to anymore. I told him I wanted a divorce. He refused. "It'll hurt my career," he said. "My mother will be devastated. We can work this out, Vic. I promise. Things are going to change." Things didn't change. But I was tired of fighting, so I stopped trying. I made a separate life. I bought my own place, started my practice, kept us technically married but fundamentally separate. We were roommates pretending to be spouses. It was the worst kind of existence, stuck but not committed, present but completely absent. Then came January 2020. I got the call at 3 in the afternoon. Mason had been in a car accident on the interstate. I-85 heading north. A truck had crossed lanes. There was a collision. He was in the hospital. I remember thinking during the drive there that this might be the thing that saved us. I know that sounds terrible. I know it does. But I actually thought, maybe this will wake him up. Maybe this will make him see what he's throwing away. I was such a fool. When I got to his room, he was pale and bandaged. The doctors had already told me the extent of the injuries. Critical, uncertain. The next few hours would tell us everything. I stood by his bed and I held his hand and I felt this surge of something that wasn't quite love and wasn't quite pity, but something in between. He opened his eyes. He squeezed my hand weakly. "Vic," he whispered, "I need to tell you something." I leaned closer. I thought he was going to apologize. I thought he was going to ask me to stay. I thought he was going to say something that would make sense of all those wasted years. Instead, he said, "Take care of my mother, promise me. She has no one else. She's alone. You have to promise me." Not "I'm sorry for everything." Not "I love you." Not "let's start over." Just a demand made to me in his final moments that I look after Eleanor. And I promised. Because he was dying and I wasn't a person who broke promises to dying people. Because Eleanor had been kind to me even when her son wasn't. Because somewhere deep down I believed that honoring his last request might mean something. He died that night. They tried to save him, but his injuries were too severe. By 8 p.m., he was gone. I cried. I'm not sure if I was crying for him or for all the years I'd wasted hoping he'd become someone different. Probably both. The funeral was a week later. Eleanor sat in the front row destroyed. I sat next to her and I let her hold my hand and I felt like a fraud because I wasn't grieving. I was relieved. I was free. And I hated myself for that relief. But a promise was a promise. So starting that February, I set up the transfer. $500 every month to Eleanor's account. For her medical bills, her rent, her living expenses. Everything she needed while she was alone and grieving her son. 60 months. $30,000. A commitment I made to a dead man in a hospital room. I never questioned it. I never asked myself why Eleanor wasn't working. I never asked myself why she specifically needed $500 every month, without variation. I never asked myself why her bills were so consistent they might as well have been calculated by a machine. I just sent the money, month after month, year after year. I closed my laptop and finished my tea. It's cold now. I don't remember drinking it, but the cup is empty. Tomorrow, I'll go back to work. I'll fill cavities and clean teeth and be Dr. Hartwell, the reliable one, the one who always does what she promises. I'll send Eleanor her $500 on the first of the month, like I always do. I have no idea that tomorrow is the day everything starts to unravel. I have no idea that someone is about to ask me a question that will make me reconsider everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed, everything I've believed. I have no idea that the dead man I've been honoring might not have stayed dead at all. The coffee shop on Tryon Street is one of those places where everyone knows the barista's name, but nobody knows their actual order. I've been coming here for 3 years. Emma knows I'll get a cappuccino extra shot oat milk. She doesn't even ask anymore, just shows up at my table with the cup already made, smile already ready. We've been friends since dental school. Not the kind of friends who text constantly or hang out every weekend. The kind of friends who can go months without talking and then pick up a conversation like no time has passed at all. Emma works in customer service at First National Bank. She's good at it, patient with difficult clients, knowledgeable about policies, the kind of person who actually cares about solving problems instead of just moving through them. Today, though, she looks worried. "I need to talk to you about something," she says, sliding into the seat across from me. "And I'm going to need you to promise not to freak out." I hate when people say that. It's like telling someone, "Don't think about elephants." and then expecting them not to think about elephants. Now my entire nervous system is on high alert. "Okay," I say carefully. "What's wrong?" Emma glances around the coffee shop. It's the middle of the day, and the place is mostly empty. A couple of laptop workers in the corner, a mom with a toddler near the window, but nobody close enough to overhear. Emma still lowers her voice. "At work, I have access to certain client account information," she begins. "Not everything there are privacy regulations, obviously, but part of my job involves monitoring transactions for suspicious activity, fraud detection, that kind of thing." I nod. I don't see where this is going yet. "A few weeks ago, I was running a routine check on accounts." Emma continues, "And I came across something that made me stop. It took me a while to figure out what I was looking at, but once I did..." She trails off, taking a sip of her coffee like she needs a moment. "Once I did, I knew I had to tell you." My stomach tightens. There's something in her tone that tells me I'm not going to like what comes next. "The account I flagged belongs to Eleanor," Emma says quietly. "Your mother-in-law." I must look confused because Emma reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. "I'm sorry. Let me explain. I noticed her account because of the pattern of incoming transfers. 4 different transfers every month, same amount each time. $500 from each source. That's $2,000 a month coming into her account. $2,000. I do the math quickly in my head. 4 people sending $500 each. 4 people who I don't know about. 4 people who are connected to Eleanor the same way I am. That's not all," Emma says. She pulls out her phone and shows me something on her banking app. I can't see account numbers or personal details. She's been careful about that, but I can see transaction dates and amounts. Every single transfer that goes into her account gets transferred out within 24 hours. Every time. Without fail. To different accounts, different amounts, but the money never stays in her possession. I stare at the phone screen. The pattern is stark, almost mechanical. In, out, in, out. Like Eleanor's account is a tunnel that money passes through but never actually settles in. "She's not keeping any of it," I hear myself say. "Not a penny," Emma confirms. "I've been monitoring her account for 6 weeks. Victoria, this isn't normal behavior. This isn't what someone does when they're struggling financially and need help from family. This is what someone does when they're..." She pauses, choosing her words carefully. "When they're moving money, channeling it, acting as a pass-through." My mind is racing. Eleanor, who I've been supporting for 5 years. Eleanor, who I assumed was living alone, paying rent, and bills, struggling with the cost of living as a widow. Eleanor, who has been receiving my $500 every month and passing it along to someone else. "How many people?" I ask. "How many other people are sending her money?" "At least 4 that I've identified," Emma says. "But there could be more. I can't see every account connected to hers without raising flags, and I'm already crossing some ethical lines just by telling you this much. But the pattern is consistent. 4 monthly transfers of $500 each. And Victoria..." Emma leans forward, her eyes serious. "I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know what fraud looks like. I know what happens when someone is systematically exploiting relationships to move money through channels that are hard to trace. And Eleanor's account is screaming fraud." I feel the coffee shop tilt slightly. I grip the edge of the table to steady myself. "Are you saying Eleanor is..." I can't even finish the sentence. The word feels too big, too terrible. "I'm saying something isn't right," Emma says firmly. "And I'm saying the way her account moves money, 4 different sources, all the same amount, all going somewhere else, that's not a grandmother struggling to get by. That's a system. An organized system. I think about all the times I've sent Eleanor money without question. All the times I assumed she was using it for rent, for food, for medical bills. All the times I felt guilty for barely scraping by while she was supposedly even worse off. I need to know what she's doing with it," I say. The words come out louder than I intended. The mom with the toddler glances over at us. I lower my voice. I need to know why Eleanor has other people sending her money and where all of it is going. "I know," Emma says. "But here's the thing, I can't tell you more without getting myself fired. Maybe arrested, actually, depending on how they look at privacy violations. I've already told you more than I should have. What I can tell you is that you need to figure out what Eleanor is actually doing, because whatever it is, it's not legitimate. Emma finishes her coffee and stands up. She places a hand on my shoulder before she leaves. "Be careful," she says. "And Victoria, don't ask Eleanor directly, not yet. If something illegal is happening and you tip her off, she'll cover her tracks." I sit in the coffee shop for another hour after Emma leaves. I don't drink my cappuccino. It goes cold in front of me while I stare at nothing, trying to piece together 5 years of assumptions that are suddenly crumbling. Eleanor is not who I thought she was. The money I've been sending every month is not going where I thought it was going. And somewhere underneath all of this is a truth I'm not ready to face yet. I have to find out what Eleanor is hiding. I have to understand why she's receiving money from 4 different people. I have to know what she does with every single dollar the moment it hits her account. I pull out my phone and make a decision. Tomorrow I'm going to find Eleanor. The next morning, I'm sitting at my desk in the practice before my first patient arrives. I've got the banking records pulled up on my computer, and I'm staring at the address like it's written in code I haven't quite cracked yet. Riverside Apartments, Tryon Street, Charlotte. I've driven past that building 100 times. It's one of those mixed-use complexes that Charlotte has been building for the last decade, retail on the ground floor apartments up above, the kind of place that's supposed to feel upscale but mostly just looks overpriced. I never thought Eleanor lived there. When I'd pictured her apartment in my mind over the past 5 years, I'd imagined something smaller, quieter, more like a place where an elderly widow would actually want to settle. Not that I'd ever actually visited Eleanor's apartment. Not once in 5 years. We met for dinner sometimes, or I'd see her at the grocery store, but she always declined my offers to come over. "I'm fine on my own," she'd say. "You don't need to worry about me, Victoria. I'm managing." Except she wasn't managing anything. According to Emma, Eleanor was a middleman, a pass-through, something that money flowed into and immediately back out of. I close my computer and grab my keys. I tell my receptionist I'm taking an early lunch. She doesn't question it. I'm the boss, and I usually work through lunch anyway. So taking an actual break is unusual enough that she just nods and makes a note of it. The drive to Riverside takes 12 minutes. I know because I time it watching the clock like it matters. The sun is high and bright, making everything look sharper than it probably deserves to. The streets are moderately busy, people running errands, people heading to work late, the ordinary chaos of a Wednesday morning in Charlotte. The building itself is more impressive up close than it is from the highway. 6 stories modern architecture, the kind of place that's trying very hard to look like it belongs in a bigger city. There's a parking garage, a small courtyard with some landscaping, and a lobby that I can see through the glass doors from the parking lot. I sit in my car for a moment, gathering courage. I'm not even sure what I'm looking for. Proof, evidence. Some kind of confirmation that Eleanor really does live here. I get out of the car and walk into the lobby. The space is cool and climate-controlled with that generic modern aesthetic that every new building in Charlotte seems to have adopted. Polished concrete floors, minimalist furniture, a wall with mailboxes, an elevator bank. There's a small office off to the left with the door slightly ajar. I can see someone moving around inside. I push open the office door. The man inside is maybe mid-50s with dark hair going gray at the temples and the kind of weathered face that suggests he's spent more time managing complaints than actually managing things. He looks up from his desk with the expression of someone preparing to deal with whatever problem is walking through his door. "Can I help you?" he asks. "Hi," I say, forcing a smile. "I'm looking for someone who lives in the building. I'm not sure what unit." "Eleanor Hartwell." The man I notice his name tag says Tony Carbone nods slowly. "Yeah, we've got tenants," he says. It's not a confirmation. It's a non-answer wrapped in compliance. "Do you know her?" I ask. She's older, probably in her 60s. Tony leans back in his chair. "I don't give out information about residents," he says. "It's the standard property manager response. Privacy and liability and all that. But if you need to contact someone, you can leave a message at the front desk and we can pass it along." I'm about to leave already preparing a retreat when something in his expression shifts. He's looking at me more closely now like he's trying to place me. Or maybe he's just assessing whether I'm a threat. Actually, I say, taking a different approach. I'm wondering if I could look at the security footage from the lobby, just to see if I can spot her coming in or out. I'm trying to surprise her with something, and I wanted to confirm she actually lives here before I do anything else. It's a lie wrapped in a sympathetic story, and Tony seems to recognize it as such. But he also seems to understand that sometimes it's easier to just help than to keep saying no. He stands up and gestures toward a small room off the side of his office. 5 minutes, he says. That's all I can give you without raising questions from corporate. The security system is older than I expected, monitors showing different angles of the building. Lobby entrance, hallway, elevator bank, parking garage. Tony pulls up the footage from the past week, fast-forwarding through the hours. What I see is a constant stream of people, not residents exactly, or at least not residents who look like they belong in a building marketed toward young professionals and empty nesters. There are older men, younger women, middle-aged couples. There are people carrying briefcases and people carrying nothing at all. There are people who enter and exit in under 5 minutes. There are people who stay longer. These people all live here, I ask. I assume, Tony says. I don't monitor every single person who comes through the door. That's not my job. My job is maintenance tenant complaints and making sure the building doesn't burn down. The security system is mostly just there for insurance purposes. I watch the footage searching for Eleanor, searching for someone who looks old enough to be a grandmother, who might have gray hair, who might move like someone struggling with age, or loneliness, or the weight of secrets. I don't see her. What I do see is a pattern. The same faces appearing multiple times, the same couple entering and exiting, a woman in her 20s with dark hair, a man in his 40s with expensive-looking clothes. They move through the lobby like they know exactly where they're going, like they belong here, like they're not at all concerned with being noticed or recorded or remembered. Then I see something that makes me stop. Can you rewind that? I ask, pointing at the screen. Tony looks at where I'm pointing and rewinds the footage. It's from 2 days ago, a couple entering the building. The woman is young, maybe 30, with long dark hair and a figure that suggests she either works out religiously or simply has the kind of metabolism that comes with youth. The man with her is taller, with dark hair that started graying slightly at the temples. He's wearing a button-down shirt and nice jeans. He's holding her hand as they walk toward the elevator. There's something about the way he moves that strikes me as familiar. Something about the set of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, the casual confidence with which he navigates the space. Can you get closer on that man's face? I ask, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Tony adjusts the angle, zooming in on the video feed. The man's face becomes clearer. Not crystal clear security footage has limitations, but clear enough to see his features. Clear enough to see the jawline I remember, the nose I've touched 1,000 times, the eyes I once believed meant something to me. My world tilts. Are you okay? Tony asks from somewhere far away. I'm not okay. I'm very, very far from okay. I need to see today's footage. I say, my voice coming out rough and urgent. Do you have today's video? Tony looks at me like I'm having some kind of breakdown, which, to be fair, I might be. But he doesn't argue. He pulls up today's footage. It's only been recorded for a few hours. It's still morning, but there it is. The same couple, same woman, same man, entering through the lobby doors at 10:47 a.m. just 3 hours ago. The man from the video, the man I just saw on the footage, he's supposed to be dead. Tony rewinds the footage. His fingers move across the keyboard with the practiced ease of someone who's done this 1,000 times. Pulling up security footage for security deposits or property disputes or whatever else requires evidence. He doesn't seem to notice that I've stopped breathing. The video plays again from the beginning. The lobby entrance. People moving through the space like they belong there, like they're not about to unravel someone's entire understanding of reality. And then I see them. The couple. The man I saw before and the woman beside him. Stop, I say. My voice sounds like it's coming from someone else. Right there. Tony pauses the video. The couple is frozen mid-stride about 10 feet from the elevator bank. The woman is laughing at something the man just said. She's young, probably late 20s, maybe 30 at the most, with long dark hair, and the kind of casual confidence that comes with knowing you're beautiful. She's wearing a sundress despite the fact that it's May in North Carolina, which means it's already warm and starting to get unbearably humid. The man's arm is around her waist. His hand is splayed across her lower back in a gesture that's so intimate, so proprietorial, that I have to look away for a second. Can you get closer on the man's face? I ask. My throat feels like sandpaper. Tony adjusts the angle, zooming in on the video feed. The image becomes grainier as it enlarges the way security footage always does when you try to make it show you more than it was designed to capture. But it's close enough. Close enough to see the features. Close enough to see something that makes my entire body go rigid. The jawline, I remember that jawline. I've traced it with my fingers 1,000 times. I felt the rough stubble against my cheek on lazy Sunday mornings when we had nothing to do but lie in bed and pretend the world outside didn't exist. The nose, slightly crooked from a break he got in college that he was always too vain to have fixed properly. He used to joke about it, about how it gave his face character. I used to laugh because I was supposed to laugh. I used to think it made him look distinguished. The eyes, dark brown, almost black, the kind of eyes that could look warm one moment and ice cold the next. The kind of eyes I stopped trusting somewhere around year 8 of our marriage. It's Mason, my Mason. The man I buried, the man I grieved, the man I've been honoring every single month for the past 5 years with $500 transfers to his mother's account. He's alive. Are you okay? Tony asks from somewhere very far away. His voice sounds like it's coming through water. I can't answer because I'm not okay. I'm the opposite of okay. I'm experiencing something that my brain is struggling to process, something that feels like the ground beneath my feet has turned to liquid, and I'm drowning in it. I need to see more, I say. The words come out wrong, too high-pitched, like they're being spoken by someone I don't recognize. Can you show me more footage, different angles today? I need to see what he's doing today. Tony's expression shifts. He's starting to understand that something bigger than a simple identity verification is happening here. But he doesn't ask questions. Maybe he's seen too many complicated situations to think that it's his job to ask. Maybe he's just tired. He pulls up today's footage and scrolls to the timestamp from this morning, 10:47 a.m. The same couple enters through the lobby doors. The woman is laughing about something, her head tilted back, her entire body communicating an ease and comfort that I recognize as the language of someone who belongs somewhere. She's comfortable here. She's home here. Mason has his phone in his hand. He's texting or scrolling or checking his bank account. I can't tell which, but he looks relaxed. He looks happy. He looks like someone who doesn't have a care in the world, like someone who isn't dead, like someone who's been lying to me for 5 years. They walk toward the elevator and I watch them disappear inside. The doors close. They're gone. But they were just here, just a few hours ago, alive, together. In the same building where Eleanor, where the woman I thought was Eleanor, receives money from 4 different sources every single month. My hands are shaking. Actually shaking like I'm cold even though the office feels warm. Tony glances at me with something that might be concern or might just be the general discomfort of someone watching another person have a breakdown in his workspace. That man, I say, and I have to stop to breathe because I don't have enough oxygen in my lungs. That man in the video, do you know him? Does he live here? Tony scratches his head. I mean, people come and go, he says carefully. If they're not causing problems, if the rent's being paid, I don't usually ask too many questions about who's who or where they're going. That's not really my department. The woman, I say, the younger woman, do you know her name? Can't say I do, Tony says. Like I said, not my department. But I know. Somehow, from the video, from the way she moves, from the intimacy of that hand on her back, I know her name. It's Amber. The woman in the video is Amber and the man is Mason, and they're living together in a building that Eleanor owns or uses or is connected to in ways I don't yet understand. I need to see everything, I say. Every piece of footage, every time they've entered or exited this building, every time either of them has been here. I need to see all of it. Tony looks at me like I've asked him to commit a crime. Maybe I have. Maybe what I'm asking him to do violates some tenant privacy law or building regulation or basic human decency. I don't care anymore. I need to understand what I'm looking at. I need to make sense of the fact that the man I've been mourning for 5 years is alive and well and living in Charlotte with a woman who's young enough to be his daughter. That's going to take a while, Tony says. Are you sure you want to? I'm sure I interrupt. Show me everything. For the next 2 hours, I watch video footage. I watch Mason and Amber enter the building on different days. I watch them laughing together. I watch him kiss the top of her head as they step into the elevator. I watch them emerge from the elevator with grocery bags, with coffee cups, with the ordinary evidence of a life being lived together. I watch my dead husband live, and with each moment of video, each new confirmation of his existence, each piece of evidence that he's been alive this whole time, something inside me breaks a little bit more. Not in a gentle way, in a catastrophic way, the kind of way that doesn't get fixed, the kind of way that fundamentally alters who you are. By the time Tony closes down the footage, I've been sitting in his office for nearly 3 hours. I haven't eaten. I haven't called anyone. I haven't done anything except watch Mason be alive over and over again. Thank you, I say because I don't know what else to say. Because manners seem absurd right now, but they're all I have left to cling to. I drive back to my practice in a daze. My patients are rescheduled by my receptionist, who takes one look at me and knows that something has gone very wrong. I sit in my office with the door locked and my head in my hands, trying to understand how I'm supposed to process the fact that everything I believed about my life is fundamentally untrue. Mason is alive. Eleanor is not who I thought she was. And I've been playing a role in something for 5 years without understanding what that role was. The question isn't just why anymore. The question is, what else don't I know? I rewound the video again and again. My finger hovered over the play button, trembling slightly as I stared at the frozen frame on Tony Carbone's monitor. The image was crystal clear, now a face I hadn't seen in 5 years, yet one I could never forget. It was him. It was Mason. There was no doubt, no hesitation, no room for denial. 100% certain. I pressed play once more, watching as the man I'd mourned, the man I'd sent 750 million Vietnamese dong to support his mother, walked into that building with his arm around a pregnant woman. His gait was confident. His shoulders were straight. There was a brightness in his face that I'd never seen during our 12 years of marriage. He looked happy. He looked free. And that freedom, that obvious contentment radiating from him, cut deeper than any knife ever could. The realization hit me like a wave, and I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. My vision blurred for a moment, and I wondered if I was about to pass out. 5 years, 60 months, 12.5 million Vietnamese dong every single month without fail. I'd made every payment on time, never missed a single transfer. I'd rationalized every sacrifice, the apartment I'd delayed, buying the expansion of my dental practice that I'd postponed indefinitely, the life I'd put on hold because I was keeping a promise to a dying man, a promise to a man who wasn't even dead. "Are you okay?" Tony's voice came from somewhere distant, muffled by the static in my head. "Miss Hartwell, you look pale." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes remained locked on the screen as the timestamp showed May 2025 in the corner. 6 months. Mason had been living here for 6 months. With her. With Amber Whitmore. And from the way her hand rested protectively on her belly, cradling the curve beneath her dress, it was obvious she was carrying his child. 7 months. Along maybe 8. Maybe more. Perhaps they'd been together even longer than the timeline suggested. I did the math in my head, a habit I developed as a dentist, always working with precision and numbers. If she was 6 or 7 months pregnant now, they'd been living together for at least that duration, maybe longer. Maybe the relationship had started before Mason's supposed death or immediately after. While I was still wearing black, still grieving, still explaining his absence to my patients, who'd ask why I was alone now, why there was no wedding ring on my finger anymore. The cruelty of it was suffocating. My chest tightened and I found myself gripping the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I thought I might be sick. "I need to see more," I heard myself say. My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else entirely. "Can you show me more footage?" Tony nodded, concern etched across his face. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up different dates and timestamps. "How far back do you want to go?" "As far as you have," I replied, my eyes never leaving the screen. As he scrolled through weeks and weeks of footage, I saw the pattern repeat itself over and over again. Mason and Amber entering the building multiple times per week. Sometimes they carried groceries. Once they carried a crib box, a crib. They were preparing for their baby, their future, their life together. The one I wasn't part of, the one I never knew existed, the one I'd been financing without my knowledge. My mind spiraled. I thought about my mother, about the inheritance. 125 billion Vietnamese dong, roughly 5 million American dollars. My family's wealth accumulated over generations of hard work and business acumen. But there were conditions attached to that fortune, strict, unyielding conditions that my mother had spelled out in her will with the precision of a lawyer. No scandals, no public embarrassment, no divorce. If I divorced Mason, I'd forfeit everything. My mother had been old-fashioned that way, believed that a woman's duty was to preserve the family's reputation above all else, even at the cost of her own happiness. She had no idea that the man I was supposedly married to had abandoned me, or worse, that he'd orchestrated some kind of elaborate scheme to drain me dry while building a new life with someone else. Because now I understood. Eleanor hadn't been struggling with medical bills or living expenses. She'd been a conduit, a middleman, or rather a middle woman. The 4 sources of money, $500 each from 4 different people, they were all funneling through her account and then disappearing within 24 hours. To where to Mason, undoubtedly. To support this life. To finance Amber's pregnancy. To build the future he decided he wanted without me. And my mother-in-law, Eleanor Hartwell, had known all along. She'd been part of it. Every single piece of this deception. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt like something inside me had shattered. Not just broken, but fractured into pieces so small they could never be reassembled. 5 years of payments, 5 years of struggling, 5 years of watching my dreams get smaller while theirs grew exponentially larger. I'm going to see Eleanor, I said, standing up abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as I pushed it back. Today, right now. Tony's eyebrows rose. Is everything all right, Miss Hartwell? I smiled, though I knew it must look more like a grimace, a twisted expression of rage and heartbreak combined. No, everything is not all right, but it will be. Once I get some answers from Eleanor. I grabbed my purse and didn't wait for his response. As I walked toward the elevator, my mind was already racing ahead, formulating questions, planning confrontations. Eleanor had lied. Or rather, Eleanor had orchestrated an elaborate deception, one that had cost me not just money, but 5 years of my life. How long had Mason been alive? How long had he been with Amber? When did this plan start? Had Eleanor recruited the other 3 people who were sending money? Was this some kind of organized scheme, or had it started as something smaller and spiraled into this massive fraud? But one thing was absolutely certain: I was about to find out everything, and Eleanor was going to tell me the truth no matter what it took. If you're still here, comment 11 so I know you're still with me. And if you were in my position after discovering this truth, would you stay silent to protect yourself or confront it head-on to demand justice? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the next decision changes everything. And a quick note before we continue: the next part of this story includes some dramatized elements created for storytelling and educational purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, you're free to stop watching here. I found Eleanor's address in the financial records Emma had pulled from the bank database. It wasn't the apartment complex where she'd supposedly been struggling to make ends meet. It was a private residence in an upscale neighborhood in Charlotte, a place I'd never known existed. The irony wasn't lost on me as I pulled up to the curb, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering the courage I'd need for what was about to come. Every rational part of me screamed to turn around to call the police to let the authorities handle this mess. But the part of me that had been betrayed, that had sacrificed 5 years of her life, demanded answers. Face to face. Right now. The address was for a 2-story townhouse with a well-maintained garden and a pristine front porch. Through the window, I could see expensive curtains and what appeared to be original artwork on the walls. This was not the home of a struggling widow. This was the home of someone with money. someone with resources, someone who had planned this very carefully. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and got out of the car. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every step toward the front door felt like walking through water. When I reached the porch, I hesitated for only a moment before ringing the bell. The woman who opened the door was not the frail, elderly woman I'd been sending money to every month. This was someone entirely different. Eleanor Hartwell stood before me in pressed linen pants and a designer blouse, her hair perfectly styled in an expensive salon, cut her posture straight and commanding. Her skin was sun-kissed and glowing. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a country club, not a home where she was supposedly struggling with medical bills and grief. "Well," she said, a thin smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "I wasn't expecting you to figure it out this quickly. I must say that's disappointing." I stared at her, unable to form words. My legs felt weak. The woman in front of me was nothing like the image I'd constructed in my mind over the past 5 years. There was no weakness here, no vulnerability, no sign of the suffering I'd imagined she'd been enduring. Instead, there was confidence, arrogance, cold calculation. "You'd better come inside." Eleanor continued, stepping aside with a gesture that felt more like a command than an invitation. "We have quite a bit to discuss, and I'd rather not do it on the porch where the neighbors might hear." I followed her into the apartment, still in shock, my body moving on autopilot, while my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The interior was immaculate, expensive furniture that looked like it came from a high-end boutique, modern art on the walls that I recognized from gallery showings I'd attended. A kitchen that looked like something from a luxury home magazine. This was not the home of a woman in financial distress. This was the home of someone who had just stolen $30,000 from me. Eleanor gestured to a sofa, and I sat down without thinking. She settled into a chair across from me, crossing her legs, with the ease of someone completely in control of the situation. She picked up a glass of what looked like expensive wine from the side table wine she'd probably been drinking before I arrived. "Mason doesn't want anything to do with you anymore," Eleanor said, her voice calm and measured, as if we were discussing the weather or the state of the economy. "He wants his freedom. He wants to start a new life with someone who actually makes him happy. And frankly, so does he want to do it with someone younger, someone who doesn't nag him about his gambling habits and his indiscretions." I felt my jaw tighten. Mason's gambling, his affairs. These were things I'd struggled with for years, things I'd tried to overlook because I believed in keeping the marriage intact. And now Eleanor was using my own pain against me. "We needed money." Eleanor continued, leaning back in her chair as if she owned the world. "Your money specifically. You're a dentist with a successful practice. You make decent income. But more importantly, you have that inheritance waiting for you, the one your mother left with all those conditions, about no scandals, no divorce. So we created a scenario where you'd be financially obligated to us. We told you Mason was dead. We told you I needed help. And for 5 years, you sent us money like clockwork. 12.5 million Vietnamese dong every single month without fail. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect." My throat felt dry. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. "That's $500 a month for 5 years. That's $30,000 total." "Precisely." Eleanor said, her smile widening into something that looked almost predatory. "And it's been the easiest money we've ever made. The scheme worked flawlessly. No one suspected a thing. You believed every word because you're a good person, Victoria. You honor your commitments. You keep your promises. You sacrifice for family. And we exploited that weakness mercilessly. For 5 years, we milked you dry while Mason lived his best life with Amber." I felt something inside me breaking apart. Not just my heart, but something deeper. My sense of safety. My ability to trust anyone ever again. My confidence in my own judgment. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor's expression shifted. The smile faded, replaced by something harder, colder, more dangerous. She set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "Right now, we want you to stay quiet." She said, each word hitting like a hammer. "We want you to pretend you never saw that video. We want you to pretend you never came here today. We want you to keep your mouth shut about what you've learned. Because if you don't, if you try to make trouble for us, you need to understand something very clearly, Victoria." She leaned forward, and for the first time I saw something predatory in her eyes, something ancient and ruthless and completely without mercy. "We have leverage." She continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We have documentation. We have evidence of things you don't even know about yet. We have recordings. We have financial records. We have enough to destroy your reputation, to ruin your practice, to ensure that no one in this city will ever trust you again. And if you try to go to the police, well, let's just say we have people who can make sure any investigation goes nowhere very quickly." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. My legs felt unsteady, but I needed to move, needed to put distance between myself and this woman who had fooled me so completely. "Get out of my way," I said. "One more thing, Victoria," Eleanor said, standing up as well. "What you discovered today, that's just the beginning. Mason and I have plans for you. Plans that will make these 5 years look like a vacation. If you're smart, you'll keep your mouth shut and accept your loss. Otherwise, things are going to get much, much worse." I walked past her toward the door, my mind reeling. Eleanor's final threat echoed in my ears as I stepped out into the afternoon sun. I had no idea what she meant by plans, but as I got back into my car with trembling hands, I knew one thing for certain. This was not over, not by a long shot. The email arrived at 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. The subject line read, "You should see this." The attachment was a single photograph. My hands started shaking the moment I opened it. The image showed me sitting in a dimly lit bar, O'Malley's Tavern, a place I'd never been in my life. In the photograph, I was leaning toward an unfamiliar man, laughing, holding a glass of red wine. My posture was intimate. My expression was flirtatious. My body language screamed infidelity. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but it looked absolutely real. I stared at the image for a long time, searching for the telltale signs of digital manipulation. Blurred edges, pixelation, inconsistent lighting, unnatural skin texture. All the things I'd learned to look for when fake images circulated online. I found nothing. The image was flawless. Every detail was perfect. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I recognized the angles. I recognized the subtle way the light hit the right side of my face. I recognized the specific tilt of my head, the exact curve of my smile. These weren't generic facial features. These were my facial features captured with perfect accuracy. I realized where they came from. Years ago, before everything fell apart, Mason had recorded countless videos of me, hours and hours of footage from our apartment, me cooking, me laughing at the television, me on video calls with Emma, me sleeping, me showering, me in moments of complete vulnerability, completely unaware that I was being documented. I'd discovered those recordings once, felt violated and angry, but Mason had convinced me it was innocent. He said he was just capturing memories. He said it was romantic to document our life together. I'd been naive enough to believe him. I'd let it go. Then years later, my old laptop had crashed. I'd assumed all those videos were lost forever when the hard drive failed. I'd moved on. I'd forgotten about them. But Mason hadn't forgotten. I later discovered that he'd quietly recovered those files before the hard drive completely died. He'd kept them. He'd preserved them. He'd built an entire digital archive of me without my knowledge or consent. And then he'd fed them into an artificial intelligence program designed to create deep fakes. The technology was sophisticated beyond anything I could have imagined. The AI had analyzed thousands of images and hours of video footage of my face. It had learned every micro-expression, every way my eyes moved when I smiled, every subtle shift in my jawline, every detail of how my skin reflected light. It had created a perfect three-dimensional digital model of my face. Then it had placed that model onto a completely fabricated body in a completely fabricated scenario. The photograph was me, but it wasn't me. It was a simulation so perfect that even I couldn't immediately identify it as fake. I recognized those angles in the photograph. They were from the videos. The specific way my left eye crinkled when I smiled came from a video of me laughing at something Emma said. The curve of my lips came from a video of me in profile talking on the phone. The exact shade and texture of my skin came from multiple sources averaged and blended together by artificial intelligence into something that looked more real than reality. Every pixel was a theft. Every detail was a violation. My own face had been weaponized against me using data that had been stolen from me years ago. The email continued below the photograph. "Nice picture, isn't it? I'm about to send it to your entire family." I felt something break inside me at that moment. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I immediately called my mother. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. "Victoria, what's wrong?" Her voice was filled with immediate concern. "Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm about to send you an email. When you see the photograph in that email, I need you to know that it's fake. It's a deep fake. It's not real. I was never in that bar. I was never with that man. The photograph is completely fabricated using artificial intelligence." "Victoria, what are you talking about?" My mother asked, confusion evident in her tone. Just wait for the email," I said. "Please wait for it." I hung up and immediately sent my mother a detailed explanation of what had happened. I explained about the videos Mason had secretly recorded. I explained about the deep fake technology. I explained that the photograph was completely fabricated, but I was already too late. The photograph had spread. My father had received it through a different channel. My extended family had seen it. My colleagues had seen it. My patients had seen it. By the time I'd managed to send out my explanation, the damage was already catastrophic. My mother called me back 20 minutes later. Her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Victoria," she said quietly, "the photograph is one thing, but I need to remind you about the conditions of my will. No scandals, no public embarrassment, no behavior that brings shame to this family. This photograph, whether it's real or fake, is exactly the kind of scandal I was talking about." "Mom, it's fake. I've explained—" "I understand," she interrupted, "but the damage is done. Your father is furious. Your brothers are asking questions. The reputation of this family is being damaged. And I'm afraid that means the inheritance conditions have been triggered." "You understand what that means, Victoria?" I understood. The $5 million inheritance was gone. The conditions had been violated. Scandal or no scandal, real or fake, the mere existence of the photograph was enough to cost me everything. 1 week after the photographs destroyed my family relationships, I was standing in my dental office finishing a root canal when my receptionist knocked urgently on the door. "Dr. Hartwell, there's a police officer on the phone. He says it's urgent." My hands froze. I set down my instruments and excused myself, my heart racing. Nothing good ever came from an unexpected call from law enforcement. Dr. Victoria Hartwell. The voice was professional and cold. "This is Detective James Morrison from the Charlotte Police Department. We've received a report that you may be in possession of controlled substances on your residential property. We have a warrant authorized by the district court to search your home. We'll need you there within the hour." I felt the ground shift. There must be some mistake. I don't have any— "The warrant is valid," he interrupted. "If you don't meet us within the hour, we will enter without you. Do you understand?" Eleanor. This was Eleanor. The drive home felt endless. My mind spun with questions, but one thought dominated: how public would this be? How much damage could this do? When I pulled up to my apartment building, 3 police vehicles were already parked outside. Not flashing lights, but visible enough to turn every neighbor's head. I could see curtains moving faces appearing in windows. This wasn't discreet. This was theater. This was Eleanor's intention: maximum visibility, maximum humiliation. Detective Morrison approached my car. He was tall, stern, his expression suggesting he'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. "We have a valid search warrant," he said, holding out the document. "We've received credible information that illegal controlled substances are stored in your residence. We need you to unlock the door and cooperate fully. Failure to cooperate could result in additional charges." "This is a mistake," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't use drugs. I don't have anything illegal. Someone is framing me. Can I call a lawyer?" "You're welcome to," Morrison said. but we have a valid warrant and we will proceed with or without your cooperation. Now please unlock the door." I knew refusing would only make me look guilty. So with trembling hands, I unlocked my apartment. What followed was the most invasive experience of my life. They opened every cabinet, every drawer, every closet. They looked through my bedroom with meticulous care. They checked under my bed inside my nightstand through every piece of clothing. They examined my bathroom, every shelf, every cabinet, every corner. They went through my kitchen, systematically checking inside appliances, removing items from shelves, photographing everything. They looked through my living room, my office space, my personal papers. Through it all, I stood watching, knowing with absolute certainty they wouldn't find anything. It took 45 minutes to search my entire apartment. When they finished, Detective Morrison looked confused. "Nothing," one officer reported. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Search it again. Check more carefully." They did. Another 30 minutes of tearing through my life. They pulled up my rugs looking for loose floorboards. They checked behind my refrigerator. They went through my closet again. They even checked inside the toilet tank. When they finished, Morrison approached me again, frustration written across his face. "It appears the report may have been unfounded," he said. "However, we still need to bring you in for formal questioning. You're required to cooperate with this investigation. You'll need to come to the station." "Am I under arrest?" I asked quietly. "Not at this moment," he said coldly. "But you are required to cooperate. If you refuse, we can change that status very quickly. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said, "when I understand." They didn't put me in handcuffs, but that was the only dignity they showed. They placed me in the back of a police vehicle with rear doors that don't have handles on the inside. As we drove away from my apartment building, I could see my neighbors standing outside their units watching. I could see phones appearing, cameras beginning to record. Text messages were probably already flying through our community chat. "Did you see the dentist in 8B was just taken by police?" By tonight, everyone in my building would know that Dr. Victoria Hartwell had been questioned on drug charges. The damage would be catastrophic. At the station, I spent 4 hours in an interrogation room with Detective Morrison and another officer named Officer Harris. They asked me the same questions repeatedly, coming at them from different angles, trying to catch me in contradictions. Where did I get the drugs? Who supplied me? Had I been selling to patients? How long had I been using? Did I have a dealer who would want to frame me? I answered every question with the same truth. I don't have any drugs. This is a false report. Someone is deliberately trying to frame me. I don't know who made this report, but they're lying. Finally, after reviewing the warrant and finding absolutely zero evidence to support any charges, they released me. "You're free to go." Morrison said, his tone suggesting he believed me but was frustrated by the waste of time. "However, we'll keep this case file open pending further investigation. Don't leave town without notifying us first." I left the police station as the sun was setting, utterly destroyed. My reputation, what was left of it after the photograph scandal, had been obliterated. Now everyone in Charlotte would think I was not just an adulteress, but also a drug user, a criminal, someone untrustworthy and dangerous. The local news would run a story tonight. I was certain of it. As I drove home in silence, I realized the full scope of Eleanor's plan. She wasn't trying to just hurt me anymore. She was trying to destroy me completely. And the worst part, she was succeeding. The practice was dying. By the 3rd week after the arrest, I'd canceled my office lease. There was no point keeping the space open. 32 patients had canceled their appointments. 2 colleagues had sent emails saying they could no longer associate with me professionally. My monthly revenue had plummeted from $45,000 to $18,000. The financial collapse was devastating, but what came next was worse. The letter from the North Carolina State Dental Board arrived on a Thursday morning. Official letterhead, formal language. The message was unmistakable. An investigation had been opened into allegations of conduct unbecoming a licensed dentist and failure to maintain professional standards. I had 30 days to respond. 30 days to prove my fitness to practice. 30 days to defend myself against complaints filed by patients who'd seen the deepfake photographs. 30 days to keep my license from being suspended indefinitely. I read the letter 3 times, trying to comprehend what it meant. My license. The credential I'd spent 15 years earning. the piece of paper that represented my entire professional identity. It could be suspended, it could be revoked, it could disappear. My attorney explained the process in clinical detached terms that somehow made it worse. A formal hearing would be held. Witnesses could testify. The dental board could recommend sanctions ranging from warnings to license suspension to permanent revocation. How long does the entire process take? I asked. 6 to 9 months, she said quietly, during which time your license remains in limbo. I hung up the phone feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. That afternoon, my father called. His voice was cold and formal. "Your mother is very disappointed," he said. "The inheritance has conditions, Victoria. No scandals, no public embarrassment. This situation violates those conditions. The lawyer says if your license is suspended, it will be interpreted as professional misconduct, which constitutes a scandal. The inheritance will be forfeited." "Dad, the photographs are fake. I've explained." "It doesn't matter," he interrupted. "Real or fake, the damage is done. Your mother is consulting with her lawyers about amending the will. I suggest you get your life in order." He hung up. I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by the wreckage of my life and tried to process what was happening. My practice was collapsing. My professional license was under investigation. My family was abandoning me. My inheritance, $5 million, was being threatened because of scandal, whether real or fabricated. My mother was sick and growing sicker, her condition deteriorating with each new crisis. And Eleanor and Mason weren't done yet. I knew there would be more attacks, more demands, more ways to extract money and destroy me. The deepfakes had been just the beginning. The legal troubles had been phase 2. This investigation by the dental board was phase 3. I realized I was trapped in a cycle of escalating attacks, each one designed to pressure me into compliance, each one calculated to destroy another pillar of my life: my reputation, my career, my family relationships, my inheritance. The only way out seemed to be to give them what they wanted: money. More and more money handed over without question, hoping that eventually they would be satisfied and leave me alone. Which was, of course, exactly what they wanted me to think. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through the impossible calculations of my situation. I had no income. My practice was essentially worthless. My license was under threat. My inheritance was disappearing. But I had access to credit. Banks would still lend to me because on paper I was still a licensed dentist with collateral. I could take out loans. I could borrow against my future earnings. I could access lines of credit that would allow me to pay Mason whatever he demanded. The thought made me sick, but it was also the only option I could see. Pay them now. Buy time. Hope that something would change. Hope that some miracle would intervene and save me from this nightmare. I didn't know then that in just a few days Mason would call demanding $100,000. I didn't know that I would take out a loan at an interest rate that would cripple me financially for years. I didn't know that paying that money would only encourage them to demand more. All I knew was that I was completely, utterly trapped. My mother called me the next morning. Her voice was weak but determined. "I've made a decision," she said. "I'm amending my will. The inheritance is being restructured. And Victoria, I'm very disappointed in you." Those words hurt more than anything else that had happened. My own mother disappointed in me. My own mother taking away the last thing I had left. I hung up the phone and sat in complete silence. The nightmare was accelerating. The attacks were intensifying, and I had no idea how to stop it. All I knew was that I needed money, lots of it, and I needed it soon. Very soon, Mason would call, and I would make a decision that would change everything. I stood in the loan officer's office at First National Bank, feeling like I was signing away what remained of my soul. The paperwork was straightforward. I would borrow 100,000 American dollars at an interest rate that made my head spin. The debt would take me years to pay off, possibly decades, but I didn't have a choice anymore. Everything had collapsed. My practice was hemorrhaging money. My family had abandoned me. My reputation was destroyed. The only way I could see to make this stop was to pay Mason the money he was demanding and hope desperately. Hope that it would finally be over. The bank officer, a woman named Margaret, looked at me with barely concealed sympathy as she slid the promissory note across her desk. She was probably in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too many desperate people sitting in that chair. I wondered how many of them had later regretted the decisions they made in moments of panic. "You're sure about this?" she asked gently. "Taking on this kind of debt when your business is struggling, it's risky. It could take you years to recover. Have you explored other options?" "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice hollow and exhausted. "I have to do this. I have people threatening legal action. I have debts I can't escape. I have to do this." Margaret didn't push further. She probably understood that when someone was this desperate, arguments about financial prudence would fall on deaf ears. She'd probably seen it 100 times before. I signed the papers with a pen that felt heavier than it should. Each signature felt like I was marking another defeat, another surrender, another piece of my dignity disappearing into the void. My hand shook slightly as I initialed each page. The paperwork seemed to go on forever: terms and conditions, interest rates, payments, schedules, late fees, penalty clauses. By the time I finished, my hand was cramping and my mind felt completely numb. "The funds will be available in your account within 2 business days," Margaret said as she collected the signed documents. "Will that be sufficient time for your needs?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." Within 3 days, the money was in my account. Within 4 days, I transferred every single penny to Mason through an electronic wire transfer. The transaction was quick and efficient and utterly devastating. I did it through a wire transfer, which meant I never had to see him, never had to speak to him directly. I just entered his account number, confirmed the amount, and pressed send. $100,000. Gone. Vanished. All that money, all that debt I'd just taken on, gone in a matter of seconds. What I didn't expect was the formal letter that arrived 2 days later. It was a typed document, notarized and official-looking, confirming that Mason Hartwell and I had settled all outstanding debts related to his estate, my support payments to Eleanor, and any other financial obligations from our marriage. The letter stated in legal language with phrases like hereinafter, whereas and all prior claims, that once this payment was received and processed, I would have no further financial obligations to either Mason or Eleanor Hartwell. I read it 3 times, looking for loopholes, looking for escape clauses, looking for any indication that this might not mean what I desperately wanted it to mean. I was terrified of another trick, another twist, another betrayal. It seemed clear. It seemed final. It seemed like maybe, just maybe, this nightmare might actually be over. For the first time in 2 weeks, I allowed myself to take a full breath. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something that might have been relief, or at least the absence of immediate panic. I lay in bed that night without my chest feeling like it was being squeezed by invisible hands. I actually slept for more than 2 hours at a time. At least now I can have some peace, I said aloud to my empty apartment as I made myself a cup of tea the next morning. At least now this nightmare is finally over. I can rebuild. I can figure out what comes next. I was still naive enough to believe that. The phone call came exactly 1 week later at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. I was staring at my appointment book, which was almost completely empty now, when my phone buzzed. Mason's name appeared on the screen. My stomach dropped immediately. Mason's voice on the other end was cheerful, almost friendly, as if we were old friends catching up, rather than participants in the most vicious betrayal of my life. The warmth in his tone made my skin crawl. "Victoria, hi," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "How are you doing? I was just thinking about you." I felt my throat tighten. "Mason, what do you want?" "Well, that's actually why I'm calling," he said. "I've been going through some old financial records, trying to get my affairs in order now that I'm starting this new chapter with Amber, and I realized we have another issue to settle." My chest tightened with dread. "We settled everything. I have a letter confirming—" Yes, I know about the letter," he said, interrupting me as if it were nothing. "I signed it. I'm fully aware of what it says, but that only covered certain debts. There's another obligation we never formally discussed." "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Somehow, I already knew. My body knew it before my mind did. "Living expenses," Mason said, his tone shifting subtly, becoming cooler, more calculating. From year 2 through year 5 of our marriage, when I was dealing with severe depression and anxiety and couldn't work, you provided me with living expenses. You paid for my food, my housing, my medical bills, my therapy sessions, but we never formally settled that as a debt. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything except grip the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white and feel my world collapsing all over again. I've calculated what you owed me during those years. Mason continued, his voice taking on a businesslike tone now. With interest for the delay in settlement, the total comes to $50,000. I'll need that transferred to my account within 7 days, or I'll have to pursue this through the courts. Mason, no, I said. No, we already settled this. The letter says, the letter covers certain debts. He interrupted, his voice now completely devoid of any warmth. But that's a separate obligation. Think of it as back pay for the emotional labor I provided during our marriage, the counseling sessions I attended, the therapy I needed because of our relationship problems. That all has a monetary value, Victoria. Surely you understand that. His words made me want to vomit. Emotional labor. As if I hadn't been the one paying for his therapy. As if I hadn't been the one supporting him while he was having affairs and gambling away our money. The audacity was breathtaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to drive to his apartment, drag him out, and force him to admit the truth about what he'd done to me. I wanted to make him feel one fraction of the pain he'd caused. Instead, I sat there in stunned silence. Victoria, did you hear me? Mason asked, his tone suggesting that my silence was somehow unreasonable. Yes, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I heard you. Great, so you'll transfer the money within 7 days. I hung up without answering. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. The realization hit me slowly. Then all at once, Mason was never going to stop. This was never going to end. There would always be another debt, another obligation, another reason to demand more money. Living expenses, emotional labor, pain and suffering, mental anguish. They could invent anything. This was a bottomless pit. I was a puppet and they were the ones pulling the strings. Eleanor and Mason had created a system where they could drain me endlessly, where every attempt I made to satisfy them just led to another demand. There was no finish line. There was no point where I would finally be free. They would keep coming back again and again, taking and taking, until I had absolutely nothing left. I called Emma immediately, my hands still shaking with rage and desperation. He's demanding another $50,000. I told her, my voice barely recognizing itself. He says there are living expenses from years 2 through 5 that I never paid him for. He's calling it emotional labor. Victoria, this is insane, Emma said, her voice rising with anger. This is extortion. This is fraud. This is... I know what it is. I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. And I know I have to stop it. Right now. Today. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep giving them money and hoping it will end, because it will never end. They will keep coming back for more and more and more until I have nothing left, until I'm completely and utterly destroyed. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than despair or fear. I felt anger, pure, crystalline, transformative anger. It burned through me like a cleansing fire. I have to do something, I said. I have to stop them, permanently. What are you going to do? Emma asked. I don't know yet, I said. But I'm done being their victim. I'm done being their puppet. It ends today. Today. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with calculations and scenarios, and the crushing weight of what I'd just realized. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to pretend I could rest. I got out of bed, made a pot of strong coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with a pen and notebook. It was time to face the numbers. Time to see exactly how much I'd been destroyed. I started writing my handwriting, becoming increasingly frantic as the numbers grew. 5 years of monthly payments to Eleanor, $30,000, 60 months, $500 per month. I'd kept every receipt, every bank statement, every confirmation of transfer. I wrote the number down and stared at it. $30,000. more than I'd earned in my entire career as a dentist in those 5 years alone. First payment to Mason, $100,000. Money I'd had to borrow. Money I'd be paying interest on for years. Money I would likely still be paying when I died. Threatened second payment to Mason, $50,000 for so-called living expenses and emotional labor. Total financial loss. I added it up carefully twice, then a third time to make sure I wasn't making a mathematical error. Nearly $180,000, more than half my net worth, gone. And that was just the money. There was also the loss of my dental practice, down 40% in revenue, probably heading toward bankruptcy. There was the loss of my reputation, destroyed by false photographs and false allegations. There was the loss of my family relationships, my parents no longer speaking to me, my inheritance threatened with revocation. There was the loss of my dignity, being publicly arrested, questioned, humiliated. And underneath all of it, there was the loss of my future. I stared at the numbers for a long time, watching them blur and refocus through my tears. These weren't accidents. These weren't mistakes. These were deliberate, calculated, organized attacks. Eleanor and Mason weren't acting alone. They had coordinated an entire scheme: the fake death, the monthly payments, the photographs, the false allegations to the police, the financial extraction. Each move was designed to build on the last one, to ensure that by the time I reached this point, I would be too broken to fight back. I was a victim of organized fraud. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just Mason being greedy. This wasn't just Eleanor being cruel. This was a systematic operation designed to exploit a vulnerable, grieving person who would do anything to keep her family intact and her inheritance secure. They knew exactly what they were doing. They'd planned it. They'd executed it with precision. And they had every intention of continuing it until I had nothing left. But something in me shifted in that moment. Something that had been broken started to reassemble itself. Something that had been dormant began to wake up. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking with an emotion I hadn't felt in weeks. Rage. Pure, clarifying, transformative rage. No, I said aloud to my empty apartment. No, this is not how this ends. This is not what happens to me. I am not going to spend the rest of my life being bled dry by these people. I am not going to disappear into despair and defeat. I will not let them win. I grabbed my phone and called Emma. It was 3:47 a.m. and I knew I might be waking her up, but I didn't care. I needed her to understand the urgency of this moment. I needed her to understand that I was done. Emma answered on the third ring, her voice groggy and confused. "Victoria, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "No," I said. "No, I'm not okay. I need your help, Emma. I need you to help me fight back against these people. I can't do this alone anymore." There was a pause as Emma processed what I was saying. Then her voice became sharp, alert, focused. "Tell me everything," she said. "Tell me what you've decided." I spent the next hour explaining everything. The scheme, the calculated nature of it, the organized way in which they'd orchestrated each attack, the total financial devastation, the reputation destruction, the loss of my inheritance, everything. When I finished, Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Victoria," she said slowly, "I need to tell you something. I've suspected for a while that this was more than just one person or two people acting opportunistically. The way the pieces fit together, the timing, the sophistication of it all, this looks like an organized operation. And if that's true, then this isn't just a civil matter. This is criminal. This is fraud. This is extortion." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I think I already knew. "I mean," Emma said carefully, "that I know someone who can help. Someone who investigates exactly this kind of thing. A federal agent. Someone who works for the FBI. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. Not quite hope, I was too broken for that, but something close to it. A possibility, a chance, a way forward. "Can you contact them?" I asked. "Yes," Emma said. "I can. But Victoria, I need to warn you. Going to the FBI is a serious step. Once you do this, there's no going back. Your life is going to be picked apart. Your case is going to be examined from every angle. There will be investigations and interviews and depositions. It's going to be painful and exhausting and emotionally difficult." "I know," I said, But I have to do this. I can't just let them keep taking from me. I have to fight. Okay, Emma said. Let me make some calls. I'll see if my contact can meet with you. In the meantime, don't contact Mason or Eleanor. Don't respond to any messages or calls from them. Just wait and let me see what I can set up. I hung up the phone as the sun was starting to rise over Charlotte. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something awakening inside me. Not hope exactly, but determination, resolve, the beginning of a counterattack. These people had underestimated me. They'd seen a grieving widow, a trusting friend, a person bound by duty and family obligation. They'd assumed I would break quietly, that I would accept my losses and disappear. They had no idea what I was capable of. A plan was forming in my mind, a way forward, a possibility that I might not be destroyed after all. The fight was finally beginning. The coffee shop Emma had chosen was in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Charlotte, the kind of place where nobody paid attention to the conversations happening in the corner booths. We arrived separately, me first arriving 10 minutes early to steady my nerves, then Emma 5 minutes later pretending not to notice me. Then the man I assumed was Agent Crawford 10 minutes after that. The separation felt intentional, designed to avoid drawing attention, to make it look like three strangers who happened to be in the same place at the same time. Agent Thomas Crawford was not what I expected. I'd imagined someone hard-edged and intimidating, someone who looked like they'd spent their entire career pursuing criminals, someone with the bearing of a military operative. Instead, Crawford was in his late 40s or early 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair at the temples and a thoughtful expression that suggested he'd seen too much and understood too well the darkness that existed in the world. He wore a charcoal suit that was professional but not ostentatious, and when he shook my hand, his grip was firm but not aggressive, reassuring rather than threatening. "Dr. Hartwell," he said, settling into the booth across from me. His voice was calm and measured the voice of someone trained to put people at ease. "Emma's told me a bit about your situation, but I'd like to hear it directly from you. I need to understand what you've been through. Take your time. Tell me everything from the beginning. Leave nothing out, no matter how small it might seem." And so I did. I spent the next 2 hours laying out the entire nightmare from beginning to end. The death of Mason 5 years ago, the promise to Eleanor, the monthly payments that never seemed to end. The discovery that Mason was alive, the photographs, the surveillance footage at Riverside Apartments, the fake deepfake images, the humiliation of having my family turn against me. The false drug allegations, the police investigation, the brawl with my career collapsing, the financial extraction that never stopped, demand after demand after demand. Crawford listened without interrupting his eyes, never leaving my face, taking occasional notes on a small pad of paper, his expression never changing even as I described the most humiliating moments of my life. When I finished, my voice hoarse from talking for so long, Crawford set down his pen and looked at me with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. He was quiet for a long moment, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for him to tell me whether he thought my case was worth pursuing. "Dr. Hartwell," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of authority and conviction. "What you've described is not a series of isolated incidents committed by one person or even two people acting opportunistically. This is a coordinated federal crime. Mason Hartwell and Eleanor Hartwell, and likely others we haven't identified yet, have been operating a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting vulnerable people. They've used the interstate banking system to move money across state lines. They've filed false reports with law enforcement. They've created fraudulent documents. They've committed wire fraud, mail fraud, identity fraud in the creation of those false photographs, extortion, and possibly money laundering." My heart began to race. Hope and fear warred inside me. "So, you can help me? You believe me?" "Yes," Crawford said simply. "We can help you, and we will. But first, I need you to understand something very important. This is going to be complicated. Not physically dangerous necessarily, but emotionally and legally complex. What we're going to do is set up an operation to catch them in the act of committing fraud in a way that we can document and prosecute beyond any doubt." "What kind of operation?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "We need them to commit fraud again," Crawford explained, leaning back in his chair. "They've been careful so far, leaving just enough distance between themselves and the illegal activity to maintain plausible deniability. But we need them to cross that line in a way that we can document and prosecute. We need them to take money that we've marked and tracked in a way that creates an irrefutable chain of evidence while we're recording the entire conversation." "You want me to give them money again?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly with dread. "Not real money," Crawford said reassuringly. "We'll provide the funds. Your job is simple: set up a meeting with Mason. Tell him you've scraped together the additional $50,000 he demanded and agree to hand it over. We'll mark the bills so we can track them through the banking system. We'll record the entire transaction with audio and potentially video. And the moment they touch that money, the moment they commit fraud in front of us, we'll move in and arrest them both." "How will you arrest them if you don't have them in custody during the handoff?" I asked, my confusion obvious. "Undercover officers," Crawford said. "Federal agents positioned strategically around the meeting location. The moment we signal them that the exchange has occurred, that we have irrefutable evidence of the crime being committed, they'll move in. It will all happen very quickly. By the time Mason realizes what's happening, by the time he understands that he's been caught, we'll already have him in custody. The same goes for Eleanor." I sat with that information for a moment, trying to process it, trying to imagine what it would feel like to finally see them arrested, to finally have justice. Part of me wanted to believe that this was finally over, that the nightmare was truly ending. But another part of me was terrified. Terrified of what could go wrong. Terrified of facing Mason one more time. Terrified that even with the FBI's help, something could still fall apart. "Will it be safe?" I asked quietly, vulnerability creeping into my voice. "For me. What if Mason realizes something is wrong? What if he becomes aggressive or violent? What if something goes wrong with the plan?" Crawford leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting mine. "Dr. Hartwell, I'm going to be completely honest with you because you deserve the truth. You will be protected. You will be wearing a discreet microphone so we can hear everything that's happening in real time. There will be undercover officers positioned within sight of you at all times, close enough to intervene if necessary, far enough away that Mason won't notice them. The moment you give the signal, which we'll practice with you beforehand until you're completely comfortable with it, our officers will move in. You won't be alone. You won't be unprotected. And more importantly, you won't be in any danger from Mason, because he won't have time to do anything except realize he's been caught." "How long will all of this take?" I asked. "How long until we can actually do this?" "Setting up the operation, probably 2 to 3 weeks, Crawford said. "We need to coordinate with multiple federal agencies, position personnel, strategically prepare contingency plans for every possible scenario. We need to make sure the marked money is traceable, that the recording equipment works perfectly, that every detail is airtight for prosecution. But by early August, we should be ready to execute the operation." I nodded slowly, trying to process the timeline. 2 to 3 more weeks of living in limbo, waiting for this to end. 2 to 3 more weeks of anxiety and fear and uncertainty. But after that, after those 3 weeks, this would finally be over. "There's one more thing you need to understand," Crawford said, his voice becoming even more serious and intentional. "Once we arrest Mason and Eleanor, there will be an investigation. There will be depositions and interviews with the other victims, and Dr. Hartwell, there are others. We've been tracking this operation for several months. There are at least 4 other families who have been victims of the exact same scheme. Different perpetrators, but the same methodology, the same targeting criteria. The case will go to federal court. You will almost certainly have to testify. You will be questioned by the defense attorneys. It will be difficult." "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood that my life was about to become even more complicated, even more public, even more painful. But I also understood that it was necessary. That this was the only way to stop them, the only way to make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. "Then we have an agreement?" Crawford asked, extending his hand across the table. I looked at his hand, then at Emma, who was nodding encouragement at me from across the booth. I thought about Mason and Eleanor, about the years of betrayal, about the future they'd almost stolen from me. "Yes," I said, shaking Crawford's hand firmly. "Yes, we have an agreement. I'm ready." "Good," Crawford said. "I'll be in touch within the week with details about the next steps. Training logistics details about the meeting location and timing. In the meantime, do not contact Mason or Eleanor. Do not make any payments. Do not do anything that might tip them off. Just live your life as normally as possible and wait for my call." "I can do that," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. Nothing about my life felt normal anymore. As we left the coffee shop again separately to avoid drawing attention to ourselves, I felt the weight of what I'd committed to. The operation was beginning. There was no turning back now. In a few weeks, Mason and Eleanor would be arrested. In a few weeks, this nightmare would finally be over. But until then, I would have to live with the knowledge of what was coming, waiting in the silence, counting down the days, until justice finally arrived. The FBI field office in Charlotte was located in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place that looked completely ordinary from the outside, but concealed serious work inside. Crawford had arranged for me to come in on a Tuesday morning early enough that there wouldn't be too many people around to notice me arriving. He'd warned me that I should use the back entrance and avoid drawing attention. This operation required absolute secrecy. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Crawford was waiting for me in a secure conference room, the kind with reinforced doors and no windows. With him were 2 other agents, a woman named Sarah Mitchell and a man named Detective Rodriguez, and a technical specialist whose name was never mentioned. They had laid out every detail of the operation on a large table, and Crawford walked me through each element systematically, his voice calm and reassuring. "The money," Crawford said, pointing to a stack of bills that were arranged in neat bundles. $50,000 in mixed denominations, 20s, 50s, and hundreds. Each bill has been specially marked using a technique that's invisible to the naked eye, but completely traceable through banking systems and forensic analysis. The moment Mason or Eleanor tries to deposit this money, spend it, or move it through any financial institution, we'll know exactly where it goes and who handles it. I stared at the bills. These pieces of paper represented everything: my freedom, my vindication, my chance to finally stop being a victim. They represented the end of this nightmare that had consumed 5 years of my life. They represented justice. Once Mason takes physical possession of these funds, Crawford continued, his voice steady and professional. Once he attempts to use them or move them through any account or institution, we have him cold. Wire fraud, possession of fraudulently obtained money, conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion. It's airtight. There's no defense, no escape, no way to talk his way out of this. The evidence will be irrefutable. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward and placed a small rectangular device on the table. It looked like a pen, nothing more. A regular ballpoint pen that you might find in any office. "This," she said, her voice professional and precise, "is a high-quality digital audio recording device. It's extremely small, barely the size of a pen, extremely discreet, and extremely effective. You'll wear it concealed inside your clothing. We recommend positioning it on your bra strap or in a pocket near your heart, where it will pick up voices clearly without being visible to anyone looking at you. The sound quality is excellent. We've tested it extensively." She handed me the device, and it felt impossibly small and light in my palm. How could something so tiny possibly capture everything I needed it to capture? How could something this small hold the key to my freedom and their conviction? "The recording will be transmitted wirelessly to our mobile surveillance equipment in the field," she explained. "We'll be monitoring in real time from a van parked nearby. The moment we hear anything that constitutes explicit fraud, extortion, or criminal conspiracy, we'll signal our undercover officers to move in. You won't be alone out there, Dr. Hartwell. We'll be with you every single step of the way, every word, every moment, every gesture. Nothing will escape our attention." Detective Rodriguez pulled up a map on a laptop screen. Independence Park was highlighted with markers showing officer positions. "The park has multiple access points and clear sight lines," he explained. We'll position undercover officers throughout the area. Some will be jogging on the trails. They'll actually be armed federal agents trained in rapid response. Some will be sitting on benches reading newspapers. Some will be vendors at the concession stand. They'll all look completely normal, completely innocent, but they'll all be watching. We'll have backup vehicles parked strategically around the perimeter, Mitchell added. Officers in unmarked cars positioned at key exit routes. We'll have surveillance cameras positioned on nearby buildings. And yes, she paused, making sure I understood the seriousness of what was about to happen. We'll have trained marksmen positioned on nearby buildings as a precaution. If Mason becomes violent, if he attempts to flee, if he tries to harm you, we can stop him instantly. Snipers. The word made my heart skip a beat, made the reality of this situation crash down on me. This wasn't a fantasy or a hope. This was a real federal operation designed to catch criminals red-handed. This was happening. What if he gets violent? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. What if he realizes something is wrong and tries to run? What if Eleanor shows up instead of Mason? Eleanor will be there, Crawford said with certainty. We have surveillance indicating they always move together on these operations. As for violence, he won't have time. The moment you hand over the money, the moment he takes physical possession of it, we move in. He'll be surrounded by federal agents before he can process what's happening, before he can even think about running or becoming aggressive. We'll have him in custody in less than 30 seconds from the time the exchange occurs. He won't even have time to understand what hit him. Rodriguez pulled up more detailed images on the laptop. These are photographs of the exact location where you'll meet Mason, he said. We recommend positioning yourself near the large oak tree on the north side of the park. It provides good sightlines in all directions. When Mason arrives, stay calm. Act natural. Let him take the money. Don't resist. Don't try to be a hero. Just let the money exchange hands and we'll do the rest. Crawford placed his hand on my shoulder. Dr. Hartwell, I know this is overwhelming. I know you're frightened, but you're doing the right thing. You're helping us stop predators who prey on vulnerable people. There are 4 other families we know about who've been victimized by this same operation. Your cooperation today might prevent them from targeting others. I nodded, trying to absorb all of this information. The weight of it was staggering. Everything depended on me now. Everything depended on me making this phone call, on me convincing Mason that I was defeated, that I was ready to capitulate completely. At noon, I returned to my apartment. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and made the call. I was sitting on my couch, the small recording device secured against my chest with medical tape, my hands shaking slightly as I dialed Mason's number. When he answered, his voice was cheerful, almost gleeful. He was already anticipating victory, already imagining the money in his possession. "Victoria," he said, "I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. Have you finally come to your senses?" "Mason," I said, keeping my voice small and desperate and defeated. "I need to talk to you about the money you asked for." "Yes." His interest sharpened immediately. Money always sharpened his interest. Money was his true love, his real motivation. Money was what drove him to destroy me. "I have it," I said, "or at least I have most of it. I've scraped together everything I could find. I've exhausted my savings account. I've borrowed money from friends. I've maxed out my credit cards. I've done everything possible. I'm ready to pay you. I need this to end Mason. I need my life back. I need to move forward and heal." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing whether this was genuine desperation or some kind of trick, weighing whether he could extract even more money from me if he waited longer or pushed harder. Where he finally asked, his tone businesslike now. "Independence Park," I said. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I'll bring the money in cash in person. We can settle this once and for all. I'll bring everything you asked for." "And Eleanor?" I asked quietly, my voice trembling slightly. "Can you please make sure she understands that this is the final payment, that there are no more debts after this, that I'll finally be free to move on?" "Yes," Mason said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He was already spending the money in his mind. "Yes, I'll make sure Eleanor knows. This is the final payment, Victoria. After tomorrow, you owe us nothing. You'll be completely free. You can move on with your life and pretend this never happened. The irony of him saying that the irony of him having no idea what was actually about to happen was almost overwhelming. I had to suppress a bitter laugh. After I hung up, I sat in complete silence for a long moment. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, Independence Park. This was the moment everything would either come together or fall completely apart. This was the moment my life would either be saved or destroyed. I spent the rest of the day in a state of suspended animation. I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus on work, I couldn't do anything except sit and wait and think about what was going to happen tomorrow. That night, I stood in front of my mirror for a long time looking at myself. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing. Every instinct in my body was telling me to run, to hide, to escape before this went any further. The fear was overwhelming. But when I looked into my own eyes, I saw something unexpected. I saw determination. I saw resolve. I saw strength. I saw a woman who had been pushed to the absolute breaking point and had decided that she would push back. I saw a woman who refused to be destroyed by predators. I saw a woman who was ready to fight. This is it. I said aloud to my reflection, my voice steady. Tomorrow is the day I take my life back. Tomorrow is the day I stop being a victim. Tomorrow is the day they finally pay for what they've done to me. Tomorrow is the day I fight back. I placed my hand over the small recording device concealed beneath my shirt, feeling its slight weight against my chest. It felt like carrying a piece of my future with me. Tomorrow I'm free, I whispered. After tomorrow, nothing will ever be the same. After tomorrow, I'll be free. I looked at my reflection one more time. The woman looking back at me was no longer broken. She was no longer afraid. She was ready. The morning of the operation arrived with perfect weather. It was a clear Tuesday, the kind of day where the sun was bright and the sky was blue, and everything felt almost normal. But nothing about this day was normal. Everything was about to change. I arrived at Independence Park at 9:45 a.m., exactly 15 minutes before our scheduled meeting. The park was moderately busy, joggers on the trails, people sitting on benches, a few families near the playground. To anyone watching it, looked like an ordinary Tuesday morning in Charlotte. But I knew better. I knew that scattered throughout the park were federal agents, undercover officers, and surveillance equipment. I knew that Crawford and his team were monitoring me from a nearby van. I knew that my every word was being recorded. I walked to the large oak tree on the north side of the park, exactly where Detective Rodriguez had instructed me to position myself. The tree's massive branches provided plenty of shade, and I could see clear sightlines in all directions. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. My hands were shaking despite all the preparation, despite knowing that I was protected. At 9:58 a.m., Mason appeared. He wasn't alone. Eleanor was with him, and they both looked completely confident and completely in control. Mason was smiling, actually smiling, as if this was just another ordinary transaction, another moment where he was exploiting someone who was vulnerable and desperate. Eleanor looked almost gleeful, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a predator about to feed. Victoria. Mason said, his voice cheerful and false. You finally made the right decision. I brought the money, I said, holding up the bag. My voice was steady, which surprised me. Somewhere in the past weeks, I'd found strength I didn't know I had. Good, Eleanor said, stepping closer. Let me see it. I opened the bag, showing them the carefully marked bills. Mason reached out to take it, and I forced myself to hand it over. My stomach clenched as he took possession of the money. This was the moment. This was the critical moment where everything would either succeed or fail. You know, Mason said casually, flipping through the bills, you were so easy to manipulate. It was pathetic, really. You believed everything we told you. A dying man's final request. A struggling mother-in-law, you swallowed it all. You deserved to be scammed, Victoria. You were a terrible wife. You were boring and demanding and not worth the effort Mason invested in your marriage. Eleanor and I deserve this money far more than you do. Eleanor laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that echoed across the park. You should see your face right now, she said. You actually thought you could outsmart us. We've been doing this for years, Victoria. We have 5 other victims exactly like you. 5 other women and men who believed our stories, who sent us money, who let us into their lives and their bank accounts. You're not special. You're just another mark, another easy target. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Let them talk. Let them confess. Every word was being recorded. How long do you think you can sustain this? I asked quietly. As long as we want. Mason said, his arrogance completely unchecked. We have a system that works perfectly. We find vulnerable people who are grieving, who are desperate, who are bound by family loyalty. We create a story that plays to their emotions. We extract money for as long as they can pay. And then we move on to the next victim. You think you're the first? You're not even in the top 5. You should be ashamed, I said, my voice gaining strength. Shame. Eleanor laughed again. Shame is for people who care about morality. We care about money. We care about living the life we deserve. And you're going to help us live that life. That was when everything changed. Federal agents emerged from seemingly everywhere. They came out from behind trees, from the jogging paths, from the park benches. They surrounded Mason and Eleanor in a perfect circle, weapons, drawn but not aimed, just ready. The operation had been waiting for Mason's explicit confession, for Eleanor's admission of multiple victims. Now they had it. Mason's face went white. He looked around at the agents, and reality crashed down on him like a physical force. What the? He started to say. Mason Hartwell. Eleanor Hartwell, you're under arrest for federal fraud. Crawford's voice came through a loudspeaker. Drop the money and place your hands on your heads. For a moment, Mason seemed to consider running. He looked at the agents, looked at the money still in his hands, looked at Eleanor. Then he bolted. He ran toward the east side of the park, trying to break through the circle of agents. But the FBI had anticipated this. Officer Mitchell stepped into his path, and Mason, running at full speed, crashed directly into her. He went down hard, hitting the ground with enough force that I heard the air get knocked out of his lungs. 3 agents were on him in seconds. They forced him to the ground, pinning his arms, securing his wrists with handcuffs. He was thrashing and screaming, denying everything, claiming he'd been framed. But the recording was irrefutable. His own words had convicted him. Eleanor, meanwhile, offered no resistance. She simply put her hands up and allowed the agents to cuff her. There was almost an expression of resignation on her face, as if she'd always known this day was coming and had made peace with it. As the agents led them away, Mason still struggling and shouting, Eleanor walking with eerie calm, Crawford approached me. You did good, he said. You did really good. The recording is clear. His confession is explicit. Eleanor's admission of other victims gives us multiple avenues for investigation. This is going to stand up in court. We're going to prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law. I watched as they were placed into separate vehicles. Mason was still shouting, still claiming his innocence, still trying to manipulate the situation, even as it completely fell apart around him. And then, as the vehicles drove away and the park began to return to something resembling normalcy, I felt something shift inside me. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for 5 years suddenly lifted. The fear that had haunted my every waking moment suddenly evaporated. Justice had finally arrived. What happens now? I asked Crawford. Now, he said, we build the case for trial. We coordinate with the other victims. We prepare for prosecution. And you prepare to testify. I nodded. I was ready. After everything I'd endured, after everything Mason and Eleanor had put me through, I was finally ready to stand up in court and tell the truth. The nightmare was ending. The real battle was about to begin. The federal courthouse in Charlotte stood tall and imposing in the September sunlight. September 2025. Exactly 5 years after Mason's supposed death, I stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, gathering my strength before ascending. I was here to testify. Inside the courtroom, everything unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. Mason sat at the defendant's table looking diminished and hollow, no longer the confident predator who had tormented me for 5 years. Eleanor sat beside him, her expression coldly stoic. Both watched me with undisguised hatred as I was sworn in by the bailiff, a D.A. Michelle Torres. The prosecutor walked me through my testimony methodically. She asked me to describe in precise detail the 5 years of monthly payments to Eleanor. She asked me to recount the moment I discovered Mason was alive. She asked me to describe each of the 4 calculated attacks, the deep fake photographs, the false drug allegations, the financial extortion, and finally the planned arrest at Independence Park. I told the truth. Every word, every detail, every moment of humiliation, fear, and devastation. Dr. Hartwell. Torres asked, "How much money did you send to Eleanor Hartwell over 5 years?" 60 payments of $500 each. I said, my voice steady. A total of $30,000 US. And how much additional money did Mason demand from you? $100,000 US the first time, I replied. Then another $50,000 US after that. He said there was no end to the debts. He said he would keep extracting money until I had nothing left. The prosecution presented the evidence methodically. Audio recordings of Mason's full confession, video footage from Independence Park showing him accepting the marked money, the deep fake photographs that had humiliated me, records of the false police report, bank statements documenting the sophisticated money laundering scheme. Then came the 5 other victims. One by one, they took the stand. Their stories mirrored mine in structure, yet each possessed its own unique tragedy. Each person had been targeted with surgical precision. Each had been deceived by meticulously crafted lies designed to exploit their deepest fears and their noblest impulses. Robert testified first. At 73, his hands trembled as he was sworn in. He had believed his grandson was dead. When Mason's accomplice contacted him claiming the boy had been killed in a car accident and needed immediate funds for funeral arrangements and hospital expenses, Robert had wired $25. 000 without hesitation. He had moved with the urgency of a grandfather, desperate to support his grieving family during their darkest hour. His voice cracked as he described learning the truth. He had called his daughter to coordinate funeral arrangements, only to discover his grandson was alive and well living in California, completely unaware that a stranger had weaponized his existence for fraud. Robert wept on the stand, a grandfather who had never needed to grieve, now devastated by the deception. He had lost not only the money, but also his confidence in his own judgment. He now questioned every decision he made. Patricia, a woman in her early 50s, testified next. She had believed her sister was trapped in an abusive marriage and desperately needed money to escape. Mason's accomplice had posed as a victim advocate, providing detailed accounts of abuse, showing fabricated photographs, creating artificial urgency and crisis. Patricia had sent $18,000 from her hard-earned savings to rescue a sister she thought was in mortal danger. She wept as she described the moment she learned the truth. Her sister had never been in danger. The scheme had deliberately exploited Patricia's protective instincts, her familial love, her desire to help someone she cared about. Her sister sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face as she listened to how their relationship had been weaponized. Patricia struggled now with trust, even toward family members she had always been close to. David and Sarah, a young married couple in their late 20s, testified together. They had believed a college friend was facing a medical emergency and desperately needed help with hospital bills and emergency surgery. Mason's accomplice had sent them fabricated medical records, counterfeit hospital documents, and heart-wrenching messages from their friend begging for financial assistance. They had each contributed $15,000 from their savings money they had scrimped and saved for years, money meant for their first home down payment. As they testified, their hands remained clasped. Their voices stayed strong despite tears streaming down their faces. Two people trying to help someone in need, only to discover they had been systematically deceived by organized criminals. Their dream of homeownership had been postponed indefinitely. The betrayal had fundamentally shaken their faith in human nature and their own judgment. They spoke about how they now questioned every request for help, perpetually afraid of being deceived again. Mrs. Williams, a retired schoolteacher in her 70s, described how she had believed she was helping a distant cousin escape human trafficking. The deception was elaborate and extraordinarily convincing. Someone posing as a social worker from an international anti-trafficking organization had contacted her. She had been presented with forged documents purporting to come from legitimate NGOs, shown fake photographs of her cousin in danger, told that time was running out and that her cousin would be lost forever without immediate financial assistance. Mrs. Williams had sent $22,000 from her retirement savings money. She could never afford to lose money that was supposed to sustain her through her final decades. She sat in the witness box, hands trembling, voice barely above a whisper, and spoke about the shame she felt for having been duped. She talked about the sleepless nights wondering how she would afford her medications, her rent, her basic living expenses. The jury watched with evident compassion as this vulnerable elderly woman described how her life had been irrevocably altered by criminals who understood the psychology of targeting seniors. Finally, Jasmine, a single mother in her mid-40s, testified about believing her adult son was in serious legal trouble and facing jail time without bail. Mason's accomplice had posed as a court officer, sent official-looking forged legal documents, created artificial urgency and panic by claiming her son would be held indefinitely if bail wasn't posted immediately. Jasmine had sent $20,000 from her retirement savings money she desperately needed to provide for her children money she'd carefully accumulated over decades for her future security. She spoke about the fear she had felt, the desperate drive to save her son, the crushing realization that she had been manipulated into surrendering money she couldn't afford to lose. Her son sat in the gallery devastated that his mother had been victimized using his name. Jasmine spoke about now working 2 jobs just to rebuild her savings. She talked about the anxiety she experiences every time her phone rings, terrified there might be another crisis, another demand. 5 victims, 5 people from different backgrounds, different ages, different life circumstances. Yet all had been targeted by the same meticulous operation. All had received fabricated videos, forged documents, and carefully constructed narratives designed to manipulate their emotions and extract money. All had been assured their money served a legitimate purpose. All had been told they could never speak about it without severe consequences. The combined financial loss from these 5 victims alone was $99,000. Combined with my own $180,000 in losses, the total impact on 6 victims was approximately $279,000, and this represented only the documented cases. The defense attorneys attempted to discredit each victim. They suggested faulty memory. They implied financial recklessness. They questioned their judgment. They portrayed them as careless and gullible. But the evidence was irrefutable. Bank records showed the complete money trail. Funds from all 5 victims had been consolidated and moved through multiple accounts, ultimately reaching accounts controlled by Mason and Eleanor. The sophistication of the scheme, the meticulous documentation, the systematic targeting of vulnerable individuals, it all demonstrated a carefully orchestrated, professionally executed fraud operation. The prosecution characterized this as an organized fraud conspiracy. They presented evidence that Mason and Eleanor had targeted at least 40 other potential victims over the years. 40 people who had received contact attempts, who had been subjected to the initial stages of the scheme, but who had either been too suspicious or too careful to fall victim. That only 5 people had actually lost money to this operation demonstrated just how expertly crafted and convincing the deception had been. As I listened to each victim testify, I experienced a complex emotional landscape. Relief that I wasn't suffering alone, rage that so many people had been hurt, grief that 5 families had been devastated by these same criminals, fierce determination that justice had to be served, not just for me, but for all of us. The jury listened intently to every word. By the time the final victim finished testifying the case against Mason, and Eleanor was absolutely airtight. Looking back on my journey, I realize I was dangerously naive. I trusted too easily. I believed because I wanted to believe. My greatest mistake wasn't loving my family. It was failing to recognize the predators wearing family masks. If you're watching this, please learn from my suffering. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the warning signs. Endless financial requests, emotional manipulation through guilt and obligation, stories perfectly crafted to pull your heartstrings. These are weapons. Family revenge often hides behind the mask of family need. Family betrayal doesn't announce itself. It whispers gently until you're already trapped. I survived this nightmare the hardest way possible. But I also discovered something profound. God never abandoned me, even when I felt utterly alone. In my darkest moments, I turned to prayer and I found supernatural strength. God saw my pain. God orchestrated justice. God restored everything that was stolen. My advice is urgent and simple. Trust but verify. Ask difficult questions. Consult professionals. Protect your finances and your heart with equal vigilance. Family revenge destroys more than money. It poisons your ability to trust anyone. But family betrayal, while devastating, can become your greatest teacher. The core lesson is this: financial abuse and emotional manipulation are real crimes that destroy real lives. They steal futures. They destroy families. But they can be overcome through courage, truth, and faith in God. I'm not extraordinary. I was simply desperate enough to fight back. If you're facing family revenge or suffering from family betrayal, understand this: you are not alone. God is with you. Justice is possible. Healing is real. Protect yourself. Trust God. Seek professional help immediately. Subscribe and share this story so others can recognize these warning signs before it's too late. Final disclaimer. This story contains dramatized narrative elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictional, but the core lessons about recognizing financial abuse and emotional manipulation are real. If this storytelling style doesn't resonate with you, that's perfectly okay. Please seek content that better suits your needs.